So today we are going to see what is NDPS Act. One, NDPS is an organized crime act, and it is somewhere lot of connection with Narcotics Control Bureau, which you've been reading in newspapers, mostly since the death of the famous actor Sushant Singh Rajput. Now, this all might have really created a huge curiosity in your minds as to know what the act actually is. The full form of the act is the Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act. This prohibits a person from production, manufacturing, cultivation, possession, sale, purchasing, transport, storage, and or even consumption, for that matter, of any narcotic drug or psychotropic substance. Now, there was this amendment bill. Actually, India woke up really late to this drugs problem in the country in 2021, whereas other countries have taken act or they have made some laws in their country a lot ago, because it is a widespread problem. It's not just in the nation, but it's an across border kind of a issue that's being raised. Second, it is really harming the younger generation. Here we are saying that India is a young country, and if our youth is getting and involved in all such kind of activities, what kind of youth are we really going to look at after a few years is the big problem that right from the government till parents in every house is facing today. So in 2021, there was an amendment bill which was passed by both the houses to rectify certain errors in earlier legislation. Now, this legislation is being done in 1985, but it was not really very active. Now, in past few years, you will see that there are a lot of NDPS cases that come into picture, lot of cases that are being attended in the court, and you will be surprised to know that even here in Bombay High Court and Sessions Court, more than Indians, there are foreigners from countries like South Africa, Nigeria, who are getting arrested, and they are actually in judicial custody at Arthur Road Jail, Baikala Jail, etc. Now, having said all this, throwing light on the fact that not only manufacturing but even consumption can get you in some kind of trouble is a very important thing that we have to understand here. Now, NDPS Act, though enacted in 1985, it has been amended thrice. In 1998, 2001 and 2014. Now, you will say why? The reason being you have to change with the changing times. There was need, all these people who really commit a crime are so smart that they keep changing things here and there. They keep twisting things here and there so that they don't get into the bad part of law. So there were certain parts which were considered as drugs, certain things which were not considered, and to take consideration of all these things, it was amended thrice in earlier days. So this NDPS Act has 6 chapters, 83 sections, and it is applicable for whole of India. This also includes all those citizens who are not only within the country, but those who are on ships and in aircraft. Now, why this? Because these drugs are being transported from one place to another through ships and aircrafts, and if it is a cross-border crime, it will be transported through various means. So ships and aircrafts are also included in the act. Now, the offenses under this act are so severe that you might have heard the word trafficking. So it's basically said drug abuse and trafficking. And the offenders may serve a jail term between 1 to 21 years. Even a fine is imposed on them. So this is a very serious crime, and these days it is becoming very difficult to get bail even in the high courts with respect to this act. Now, there are some words you've been listening to as we started the session: narcotics and psychotropic. What is this? We just know drugs, right? We have heard say cannabis, opium, poppy. So how is this really different from one another. So these are some important words, key highlights of the section of the act, where you will not find in some other acts. There is something called as small and commercial quantity. Now this is the heart of this act. One, small is where a person is maybe having it in possession for consumption, and commercial quantity, of course you're going to sell it, right? You're not going to sit and eat everything. So that becomes a trade, drugs trade. And then there are different punishments with respect to whether this quantity is small or commercial, that is huge. So this is very important part of this act. There, this quantity is decided on what, and what is it called? That's quantum of substance. We are going to see each one of them one by one. There is something called as controlled substance and article. Now, how is that different? And second most important thing, as far as the process of arrest of a person with respect to this act, is search and seizure, wherein there are a lot of loopholes that can be pointed out as an advocate, as a practicing advocate in the court, for getting bail for the accused person, and it's very important. And there's something called as contraband and non-contraband. Now we'll see what is that. So narcotic drugs, basically this all comes quite a lot from science and medicine. If you have taken a crocin, say, or a paracetamol because you had headache, don't you read druggist and chemist on every shop who sells medicine? So how is that different? The point is that narcotic substance, if you read this, it says anything that blocks pain, just like I said, a painkiller, and it creates a feeling of euphoria. Now, this doesn't happen when you take crocin, right? So this is one striking difference as to what a normal medicine is and what a narcotic drug is. And this difference actually gets the person in jail, or he is acquitted if it is a medicine or it's a drug. So feeling of euphoria and extreme calm is very important as far as a narcotic drug is concerned. First of all, the court has to understand whether it's a drug in first place or no. It may be a simple medicine. Now, we had wide spread of COVID. Obviously, we didn't have medicines at that time because the whole thing was new for us, COVID outbreak. Then we had medicines, vaccines, and all sorts of things in the market. Whether it's a drug or it's a medicine, that's what is to be understood and defined by the court. Then they can carry on with the trial. So you can't just really accuse any person. And that's the reason why there are certain criteria or specific definitions for understanding whether it's a narcotic drug, whether it's a psychotropic substance or no. Now, what is psychotropic substance? Chemical substances that change a person's mental state. That's very important. The person may just experience hallucinations and he is in his own world. He's not worried about anything. So that's the mental state of the person is to be considered. If the person has consumed and he gets caught by a policeman, he will be able to see the behavior of the person and judge and understand. And maybe he may be able to say, okay, there is something wrong. Let me take his test. And he will come to know in the test whether he's consumed alcohol or it's drugs or something else. So that's the most important thing that every advocate should remember, because these are certain points, or see, these are certain defense that you can take in the court for your client. And of course, it, as you know, all these affect your brain and nervous system and how it works. Now, determining the quantum of substance, that is the quantity, like I said, whether it is small or commercial, is very important, because as I've mentioned here, it tells the court in a very sound understanding what kind of punishment and how much. So the quantum of punishment gets fixed on this. Say if a person is caught with a very little amount and he is a consumer, the court is going to fine him and set him free. But if he gets caught with, say, 4 kgs, 5 kgs, of course it's a commercial quantity where he will be termed, in general parlance we call it a drug peddler, and he will be given a different punishment punishment we will look at what punishments are given in the act. Now, what is contraband? Contraband are basically exported illegally. Okay, so now we have come to a phase where it is not with us, but imported and exported. That means this is going across the border, and of course, without payment of duties. Now, you can't really pay duties for illegal things, right? So there is some countries have total bans, some countries have partial, where they allow consumption for recreation, but it's most of the countries in world have banned these substances. And what is controlled substance? So controlled substance are the ones which are regulated by the government themselves. So they only manufacture, possession, everything, use. So basically you can call it as a medicine that is being manufactured or used by the government themselves for selling and all. So those kind of chemicals we are talking about. Now this act has certain very important sections which I would like to throw light upon. So section 2, as you know, in every other act has definitions, and this also has very important definitions wherein you will understand what is the act about, or rather what it contains. Now you can go through your bare acts for that matter, but I will just briefly tell you what it is. There are certain definitions like who an addict is. Someone who has taken once, say you don't even know that you are consuming some kind of a narcotic drug. Some friend of you gave it to you in the party and you ate it. Are you an addict? No, you not. Okay. So who is an addict? So what is cannabis, charas, ganja that we call in general language. Cannabis is its official name mentioned in the act. Also, what kind of parts of that plant? Now, I hope you all know that these are certain plants which can be grown, and there are leaves, flowering tops, or either it could be a twig. All those parts can be consumed as drugs. So they refine it and make a powder or maybe a liquid or whatever kind of a form that they can sell it on. So they have defined all this in the definition section. What is a coca leaf, coca derivative, just like opium and poppy straw, etc. You will get one most important definition in the act, which is illicit traffic. And it really explains very well, saying that it is in relation to NDPS, means cultivating of any coca plant or opium poppy, or that means even if you're cultivating it, you are not selling it, but you are not consuming it, but even cultivation is included in this act. See, because the whole problem starts from there. There is somewhere someone who's planting it. It's not just a small quantity. He's actually cultivating it like a farm, like they do farming, and then they are getting huge quantities, right? So cultivation is also included in this, and engaging in production, manufacture, possession, and all those sort of things, wherein it could be interstate or it could be import export across countries. So transshipment is considered, and dealing with any kind of activities, and even handling such kind of substances is also prohibited. So by now you might have understood one thing, that this is a very stringent law that is made in India. As far as India is concerned, we talk a lot about culture. We follow family rules, values, all those kind of things. And that's why narcotics is very, very strictly prohibited, because of course it's not good for health. But second is why India is having such a stringent law is this is the reason for that. Next is section 8, which I have enlisted here because it's important. What does it prohibit really? Section 8 prohibits certain operations. So as I said earlier, cultivation of say coca plant or opium, poppy, cannabis plant, all this is prohibited by law. Now, one thing is important. We say this is not allowed, that is allowed, but it has to be written. So where is it written in the act? This is the place where it says that this all kind of activities, including production, manufacture and selling, till selling, even keeping it in the warehouse, every other little activity that happens right from growing the plant till selling it is all included. You will actually see that there is one little word like sell, purchase, even transport, use, manufacture, possess. So someone else, for example, you have no clue and someone gave you, maybe someone whom you know has just given you a pouch and you say, okay, this is something, and you are caught with it. And later on, the police tells you that, madam, this is poppy. Just imagine. So, like our mothers used to tell us when we were kids, please don't talk to strangers. Please don't take anything from people. I would rather add on to it, please don't take anything, even from people you know, because you don't know them well. And secondly, you don't know how you are getting into troubles without you even knowing about it. These days, it's become very, very difficult to understand what a person is doing and what is not. So prohibition is a very important section in the Act. Next is section 21, which talks about manufactured drugs and preparations. Now, why are we talking about manufactured drugs? That's because we need to understand what is manufactured in first place. Now, cannabis, opium, all those kind of drugs and psychotropic substances that people consume are not directly grown. I mean, it's not readily available. They have to be, as I said, they grow as a plant and then you take the seeds, twigs, etc., etc. And then there is certain process that they follow, and then some kind of form, liquid or powder or other stuff is made. So manufacturing is one important part that covers in this Act. Now, this includes talking about a lot about commercial quantity, because it has rigorous imprisonment for a term which is not less than 10 years, and it could be extended till 20 years. So say if a person is manufacturing, and see, this is a business for some people, and he's not going to get caught in one case. So maybe there are 4 or 5 such cases wherein he is pronounced as a manufacturer. So just imagine the quantum of punishment that he will have to go through, because just one case can get the person in trouble for at least 20 years of his life. So this is really a very, very stringent Act, as I mentioned earlier. And of course, then there is fine, 1 lakhs to 2 lakhs and all. I don't think that they care about it. But yes, staying in judicial custody or like imprisonment, like you call it, for 20 years would be really maddening. Next, we move on to section 31A. Now, why I have specifically mentioned it? Because it talks about death penalty. So you can understand the grievousness of the matter. What kind of a punishment that can be really imposed on the person is something you cannot imagine. Because if you say, if you think as a lawyer, death penalty comes to your mind only in cases of murder. Other cases, you would hardly think of it. Then you would say, okay, maybe he may get bail or he may not. But death penalty is a rare, even in cases of murder or some very really bad crimes like Nirbhaya case, as we all know, death penalty was imposed. And Supreme Court is very, very strict as far as death penalties are given, because the common understanding of death penalty is that we are not supposed to take away a person's life. We are no one, because every person has the liberty, the freedom to live. Article 21 of Constitution, you might have heard a lot about this, but this is the basic understanding from where the concept of opposing death penalty comes from. But at the same time, Supreme Court also says that where the crime is really gruesome, very grievous, someone else's right to life has been snatched away in a terrible manner, in the rarest of the rare cases, death penalty should be imposed, because people have to understand that this is not a joke. Someone else's life is as precious as yours, and hence death penalty has to be given. And if you see, 31A is inserted later on, because it is having that A letter with it, and it tells about death penalty for certain offenses after previous conviction. That means the person is already convicted earlier, and again, as I said, the person is having say 5 to 6 cases in his name enlisted with the same kind of sections from NDPS Act. That means he is a regular manufacturer or a trader. Then he will have that past bumping into him while he gets this punishment. Now, a general rule is that in the court, the past punishments or the past record of the person is not to be considered while he is imposed punishment in the current given or instant case. But here in this act, this is different. It just means, or it throws light upon the fact that he is a regular repeat offender in the same act, and this is a very stringent act. So 20 years means how many years? Say 5 cases. If you say in every case he gets a 20 years imprisonment, so it is what, 20 into 500 years. So yes, he is a repeat offender and he may be given death penalty in that case. Next, we move on to section 31A, which talks about foreign jurisdiction. Now, why is foreign jurisdiction important, you might think? The important part in this is that when a person is involved in trans-border, cross-border crimes, and it is, of course, one person cannot do it. One person can steal, one person can commit robbery, one person can commit murder, but he cannot do a lot of other activities involved in one act as it is in this considered under this act. He needs to be a part of a gang, in simple words, and we call it organized crime or organized. He's a part of a syndicate, organized syndicate. So this is an organized crime when it comes to cross-border transactions and all this transportation of materials when they happen. So defining foreign jurisdiction is again very important as to what is Indian and what is foreign. Now again, the important part why it is mentioned or why it is important in this act is because we are also considering citizens who are boarded on ships and aircrafts. So what is foreign and what is Indian is supposed to be understood in a very proper manner. Otherwise, you may be just fighting a weak case. Section 24 talks about external dealings. Now, external dealings, as I mentioned just now, we are talking about cross-border transactions and things happening over there. So it talks about punishment for external dealings in NDPS, that's narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances, and that which is in contravention in section 12. So some importance here is that whoever who is engaged in or who is a trader or who controls a trade whereby a NDPS, narcotic drug and psychotropic substance is obtained from outside India and it is supplied to person who is outside India. So you are not inside doing anything within the country, still he will be considered under this section. So you can really understand how the act is flowing from being stringent to more stringent in its words. Next is section 27A, which talks about possession of contraband. Now, the main highlight is that this talks about punishment for financing illicit traffic and harboring offenders. That means if you are helping some offender, some drug peddler, some drug manufacturer, then you will also be punished. Also, financing. So say you are not doing anything, but you are just giving money. So again, you are an offender in that case. So that punishment is given in this section. Understanding that any little activity related to the act is considered under this law, and it is so stringent that everybody will get punished. No person will be left alone. Okay, you have just given 2 rupees, you go. No, of course, it's not 2 rupees. I'm just saying. Next, we move on to section 35, which talks about culpable mental state. Now, the most important part in the act is that so-called mental state is very important because these drugs, these psychotropic substances affect your brain, your nervous system. It may just block your thinking. You have no idea what's going around you. There are many convicts or there are many consumers I have seen who have no clue what's happening around them. They are taken from one place to another and they are just not aware about it. They are in their own what kind of world they only know. So this section 35 talks about presumption of culpable mental state, which actually talks about having an intention or a motive or even a knowledge of a fact or belief or even a reason to believe of that fact with respect to these drugs, of course. So it's very important, because you can't really have evidence, you can't really have a normal thing when you talk about a case. There could be some presumptions that are being made, and this section talks about exactly about this kind of presumption, where it talks about culpable mental state. Next, we come to section 41, which gives power to issue warrant. Now, here, as I mentioned in the introduction, the police has to be very careful, and they are being forced to, by the act, of course, to follow a certain procedure while dealing with these kind of cases, because there is lot of power that vests with them, and if they don't do it properly or they mishandle things, then the case or the person or the whole NDPS Act will be of no use. So this procedure is very, very important as far as police is concerned. Now, this is one very important section as a litigating lawyer to gain bail from even the High Court. So I have seen and I've heard a lot of senior lawyers talking about section 41 as to how the police has not really followed the procedure which is mentioned in the act, and he has failed in his duty, and only on that sheer point the accused, so-called accused, gets bail. So it's a very important section from our point of view as well as from police point of view. Next is section 50, which talks about conditions for search. Now, as I threw a little light upon the fact that there is something called a search and there's something called a seizure that happens during the process. Now, basically what happens is a person is going on a bike with a bag. He looks like a college boy with a bag of maybe books or a tab with him. And suddenly when he sees police, he is little worried. And that worry is instantly captured by the police. He says, what's wrong with this boy? He's looking like a normal boy going on the bike. What's wrong? And he stops him. He says, okay, show me your license, show me other papers. Okay, you have it all. What's in the bag? Why is he looking so worried, threatened? And he finds that the bag is not having any books or tab or water bottle, but a bag of drugs. Now, this was a surprise check. Nobody knew that the boy was carrying drugs, but he got caught. So there are certain conditions that are being laid down in section 50 for search. This is one, surprise check. And second is, other way is that when police actually get information of some undisclosed person, of course, they also have a lot of contacts, and they lay a trap whereby they know that X white color SUV is going to pass by this checkpost, and they lay a trap over there and they catch hold of the people inside. They say, okay, we want to search, and they do the job. So all this while laying the trap, still doing the search, what are the conditions that are to be followed by the police people is mentioned in this. And as I was mentioning, it talks about procedure that is mentioned in chapter 5. One is search, another one is seizure. And the most important highlight of this chapter of the section for procedure is that whoever is doing this search or is involved in seizure. Seizure is where the policemen take charge of the bag of drugs or box of drugs from the accused person. So that's seizure. They require appropriate permissions from their higher authorities. If they have failed to mention that, they have failed to comply to certain permissions or certain facts that they have been told by the higher authorities, by their higher officials, then the whole case is a waste. Even if the person is caught red-handed, still he may escape from the whole procedure, because whole trial, because they haven't followed the procedure. They need to take appropriate permissions. Now, in earlier days, they were supposed to get a written permission from their higher authorities to lay down trap, from there till conducting search, till taking seizure of the even documents, or the drugs or contraband. But in today's time, where we just send a message on WhatsApp, they are actually given relaxation for written permissions, and they may inform their seniors over a phone call or a message, where they might have got, as they call it, tip from somebody, and they are rushing to a place. They don't have time for taking written permissions from their higher authorities. So what do? They just give them a call and get their permissions and go ahead with their plans. Now, this has become very important because we are talking about a very stringent act, and most of the people are not aware about. Moreover, apart from the normal policemen that we see in the courts or the police station, it's very important to understand that the NDPS Act actually has something called as Narcotics Control Bureau. You might have read about NCB in news, maybe. So that was set up in 1986, just after the act was made, and it states a lot of importance in the NCB during the whole procedure goes on. And this is an agency. So there is a different part of police like CID, CBI, who are called as agency in their words. And what do? They coordinate with various ministries, offices, state central enforcement agencies in connection with drug law enforcement and matters which are related to drug abuse. So that's very important part, because this is a very special kind of an act. So they have a special setup of policemen for handling this. Normal policemen or the day-to-day kind of crimes handling policemen cannot really come into picture. They may catch a person, but NCB will be the highest authority to handle and take care of all such matters which are related to drug abuse. Now, you know these famous examples I have mentioned here because it involves some starlets from the film industry. And moreover, in India, when any news comes about an actor, we are very curious, and then that's where we come to know that there's something called as NDPS, there's something called as drugs, and you might have read about it. So Sushant Singh inquiry was going on. If I'm not sure if people have read about this, but very interesting fact that just a little bit of it I'm telling you, that after a lot of things came in news that maybe he was consuming, and then lot of other actors were interrogated to understand how the drug flow was being made within the industry. Several people were arrested. Several people were called for interrogation during investigation by the NCB, and later on other kind of things that entailed. Some people got bail, some people did not. You might have read about it a lot. But the most important point here to understand is that NCB directly charge sheeted certain actors for allegedly not only consumption but supplying drugs. And that's where they tried to understand and know whether the drug, whether it's a big gang or it's a syndicate or it's just consumption that happens. And I think they got hand to certain things. Second one, very famous that you might have read about is or heard about in the news is Cordelia Cruz investigation. So that was concerning the son of famous actor Shah Rukh Khan. And what happened? He might have got bail in the lower court, but because of certain points in the investigation, he had to apply for bail in High Court, and he got it. Why? One thing important that we have to understand from a lawyer's point of view is, why did he get bail in High Court? Not because it is High Court. It's because right from the beginning, they were saying that he wasn't found in possession of any drug. And this point was upheld in the High Court, where they said, okay, maybe that there is a little poor investigation, or rather, even if the investigation was strong, they didn't have sufficient evidence to prove their case, and thereby he was given bail. There are these two movies that I have mentioned because I especially took a note of it, how movies are also showing or displaying the current problem of drug abuse within our country. One is Urta Punjab and next one is Radhe. Now, you would be wondering why Bombay High Court and Delhi High Court is mentioned there. So there were some objections raised by people of course, in the court by filing a petition with respect to these movies and displaying certain scenes, or rather the whole story that they have made in the movie, and showing that how people are involved, how things move on with respect to drugs. So there were certain objections that were being raised legally in Bombay High Court with respect to Udta Punjab, and in Delhi High Court with respect to Radhe. So finally, the courts found that there was no problem with displaying or showcasing the movies in theaters, and that's how we all saw the movies. So getting an updated knowledge, watching a movie is great, but if it is involved in some court proceedings, or rather a petition is filed or something, you should always go ahead and read that, because it's very important from a lawyer's point of view. You never know, tomorrow you might get a case and you might have to defend your client with the same rigor. So here I have enlisted some very important judgments that actually paved path for how narcotics, the whole act, NDPS, has been changed. It's the one is amendments that are being made, okay, but the other one is interpretation of the act or the law in the courts, and mostly it happens in Supreme Court, high courts, of course, high courts, because you litigate on law points and not on the facts or the evidences, which happens in the trial courts. So these all are Supreme Court judgments, which are very important from study point of view, also from litigation point of view. One important judgment that I want to mention specifically here is E. Michael Raj versus NCB, that's Narcotics Control Bureau, which was in 2008. And in this case, an SLP, special leave petition, was filed in Supreme Court, whereas it directed that the judgment of Kerala High Court actually said that the conviction and sentence of the accused appellant was under question. It was under section 21C of the act, and Supreme Court confirmed that. So this is a very important thing that happened in drugs cases during that time. So we are talking about 2008, way back then, and it went on modifying, or rather refining itself as judgments came along. One important judgment that you should read is Hira Singh versus Union of India, where you will understand a lot about these drugs cases, NDPS Act cases. Other important one that I want to specifically point out is Tofan Singh. Tofan Singh versus State of Tamil Nadu, which talks about quantity. What should be considered and what should be not considered as narcotic substance or psychotropic substance or drugs is very important. As I mentioned earlier, these are plants. So whether you consider, like, say for example, a person is having a bag full of twigs. It looks like a normal twig. So is that a drug? No, it's not processed. It's not manufactured. It's not a white powder. So this is not a drug. No, it is, because that's what ultimately is going to happen with the twig. So whether the twigs are considered or not, whether the leaves are considered or not. So basically these people are very smart. They don't transport white powders directly. They have these different forms. They just directly take the plants, they take leaves, they take seeds, they take twigs. So that's very important to understand. Tofan Singh is one case that you should read about. So having spoken a lot about all this, there are certain international conventions, because I mentioned that this is a cross-border trade or a cross-border problem. It's in every other country that the drugs problem, the drugs abuse has become a big problem with children. So there were certain international drug control conventions that have come up. I've stated here that's right from 1988, you can see, and United Nations is actively involved in taking drastic steps towards stopping this whole drug abuse, in curbing such activities. And the latest one that you can see is 1971, where it says it's a convention on psychotropic substances. So you can see how narcotic drugs and psychotropic substances have grown to such an extent, such a huge extent, that United Nations has to actually take note of it and take some action for curbing the activities. Next is I have noted certain important, like World Drug Report of 2021. There are certain conferences that happen after certain time period in United Nations to throw light upon the current situation with respect to drug problem across countries. And there is something called as Global Commission on Drug Policy. There are a lot of steps that are being taken by people across the world. People as in, I mean the governments of all the countries. And there is also International Drug Control Convention. I would request you all to go on these links and read about it, because it's actually telling you how big the problem is and why the law is so stringent. Last, we come to punishment, which is given in chapter 4. So sections 15 to 31 talk about punishment. 31, as I mentioned, 31A earlier talks about death penalty, and 32B talks about the factors with respect to punishments, which should be taken into account for imposing higher than the minimum punishment. So there was a certain time period when king was the sole authority to impose any punishment or any person. But that doesn't happen in the open court system that we have today. Even the judges are responsible for the punishments that they give, and they are supposed to give reasoning, not just impose punishments, but give a reasoning to it as to why he found the case was that gruesome, why the act was of such nature that he has had to impose certain stringent punishment on the accused. So these all this is given in section 32B as to why the judge has imposed higher punishment than the minimum that normally is being imposed on any accused with respect to NDPS Act. I have there are a lot of judgments that are coming up in last 2 years, but I have made a comparison. There are almost 20 to 22 judgments which are from last year of Supreme Court. I've here noted only 5 out of them, which I found very interesting and important from a point of view of understanding the NDPS Act as to how the Act really works, and it throws light upon certain facts which may be silent in the Act, how the court has interpreted certain sections apart from having it in the bare Act. So first is Sukhdev Singh versus State of Punjab, wherein the Supreme Court upheld conviction of that appellant, that is the accused, and it talks about physical nature of the material is not relevant to determine the content. Physical testing is also not prescribed under the Act, and that's the reason why this is an important judgment. Now, in a recent case in Bombay High Court, I came across that there is a new drug that has come up, which looks like little sparkling stars on a piece of paper. So should the weight of the paper be considered? Because the sparkling lights or the stars, the substance is the actual drug or psychotropic substance. So the court has said that yes, the paper has to be considered because it is not detachable and it is both together considered as a psychotropic substance or a drug. So this kind of interpretation has to be done by High Courts and Supreme Court with respect to NDPS Act, because new things are coming in the market, and that is not mentioned in the Act. As we know, it's a 1985 Act. Still, we have really tried, and our government has been keen on amending it thrice, as I said earlier. But still, there is some room for interpretation. Always. Next, we move on to the next judgment, that is Sanjeev Kumar Singh versus State of Chhattisgarh. Now, this throws good light on section 54 of the Act, where we talk about independent witness and what happens when the independent witness turns hostile. So does that affect the acquittal or conviction of the accused? Because you have just one witness and he's turned hostile. So what do you do? This is explained in Sanjeev Kumar Singh case. Next is Narcotics Control Bureau versus Mohit Agarwal. It's very interesting case. If you read, it talks a lot about, it interprets very nicely section 37, 37.1 and 37.1b of the Act. What are certain reasonable grounds? So it tries to define what is a reasonable ground, and it also nicely explains the expression bail considerations. So should you be considering the fact that the accused is from a good family, the accused is having respect in the society, such conditions when you appear for bail, you say, right, that the person is having good name in the society, he won't abscond, he will help assist the police during the investigation, he will attend every interrogation. But is that really the same case as it is in other cases with respect to NDPS? That is something explained in this case very nicely. So reasonable grounds and bail considerations are the two important expressions which have been nicely defined in the judgment. Next is State of West Bengal versus Rakesh Singh. By the way, these are all from 2022 cases of Supreme Court. Okay. So coming back to the case, they are trying to understand what happens when you don't do any recovery from the respondent, and what is intermediate quantity. Now we have been talking about small quantity, large quantity, but these people who deal with such kind of psychotropic substance deal as in the one who is transporting. They are so smart, all those who manufacture and transport, they are so smart that they carry such a quantity that is neither in any of the categories. They know the act very well. They know that act more than their advocate knows, perhaps, and they try to find a way for doing their own business. So in this Rakesh Singh case, Section 27A and Section 37 is nicely defined, or rather explained, with respect to recovery and intermediate quantity. And the last one that I've mentioned here is Intelligence Officer versus Naushad KK. And this throws light upon Section 21, where the quantity of neutral substance, whether it can be excluded, whether it can be included while determining small and commercial quantity. That's one of the important parts of the process that the police follows. So as we have seen in the process, first of all, whether it's a drug, NDPS, whether it's an NDPS, whether it's a small or commercial quantity. And third point is whether the police has followed the due procedure that is being laid down for them during search and seizure of the drug or the psychotropic substance. These three very important points to be remembered by every lawyer who wants to practice in this area, whether it is sessions court or in high court, because these are certain places where you can find certain points, loopholes to get bail for your accused client, or if you are pleading for the prosecution, you can make your case strong. So this is how you interpret your whole NDPS case, and I think that's where we stop for our act with respect to this presentation.
Oh, Sumedha, there's one question. Ma'am, can you please share some examples of leading evidence?
Does it mean interpretation of evidence or actual?
I think the participant wants to know that in courts, what are the evidence that are produced in, like, can you give example? Yeah.
Oh, of course. In the courts, what happens is the prosecution is trying to prove their case by giving evidences such as the whole bag of drugs. I have seen a big carton with certain papers and powder being produced in the court to show that this was what, as I mentioned, the seizure, right? Part called seizure, where they take charge, they take the bag physically in their possession from the accused. So that is one. Secondly, now, if a person is, say, I had given an example about a boy riding the bike. So how can you prove that he was riding with the drugs? So yes, he had the bag. They will have certain photographs. You know that every other checkpost or traffic signals has good cameras these days. Earlier it wasn't, but now we have. So they identify the person with the bag through the CCTV footage. Now for CCTV footage in the high court or other courts, you have to give a transcript as in writing as to what you see in the CCTV footage. So that can be produced. The actual bag or the carton of drugs can be produced. Even they can do certain tests of the accused person to show the person, if the person has consumed, then certain tests, medical tests will reflect that. So these are certain kind of evidences which are being produced in the courts.
Ma'am, can you please throw the light on culpable mental state? I haven't understand it.
Okay, so basically when we talk about a mental state, that means that when a person is, say if the person has consumed some drugs, okay, he will not be in a state of mind that you are right now, right? Like you are asking question, you are in a very good studying state of mind. The person will not be. So that is one. And the person who is trading in this business, who is in common terms, we call him drug peddler. So culpable as in he will have that intention, right? He is not just carrying the drugs with him without any knowledge. He has the intention of selling it. He knows that it is prohibited by law and still he is committing the act. That is the mental state that he is having. So like have in criminal law, you keep talking about mens rea, right? Guilty mind. It's something like similar to that in the act, and it is mentioned specifically because this is a special act and a stringent act. That's why.
Thank you so much. Now I understood very well.
What is
Yes.
the core function of the NCB?
Okay, so NCB is basically involved in investigation and interrogation, that like normal, like any other police does, but they are dedicated to this act. So whatever crimes that are committed, maybe manufacturing or selling or trading or even cultivation or consumption, all these are being taken cognizance of by this special team. So it's like a special team of police who handle only NDPS cases.
Ma'am, can you shed some light on the career prospects for advocates in this area?
Definitely. See, as a young lawyer, I would suggest that these certain acts and practice in these certain newer acts like MCOC, that's Organized Crime Act, NDPS Act, POSH Act, POXO Act, you can go and actually see what it is. These are all relatively newer acts which are being made, say, in 2013, or if POSH is made in 2013. So all these acts are these kind of cases that come to the court. Even the senior lawyers, they have to really work hard. And see, even though NDPS was made in 1985, but cases are like blowing in right now. So there are a lot of cases that come up under this act since past, say, 5 years to decade. And even senior lawyers have to research and understand and then plead in the court. Now, these lawyers would prefer what they are doing, older crimes, wherein they have knowledge. They don't really need to even read the case. They can just understand it from their junior and go ahead and plead the case. They are very, very confident about it because they're proficient in it. But these newer acts really open up a lot of opportunities, because even that person is going to do the study. If you do it, then I think it's a very good opportunity for young lawyers.
Okay. Ma'am, what is your personal take on the success of the NDPS Act, taking into account many celebrities and politicians being involved in the use and trafficking of such substances? For instance, eyewitness Prabhakar in the Cordelia Cruz case passed away last year due to heart attack. So there is a great scare to witnesses. So what is your view on that?
Okay, so I think this question itself consists of some 2-3 parts, as I understand. One is, see, these kind of cases come to light because certain politician is involved or actor is involved. But that doesn't mean those are the only cases. There are a lot of cases in the courts. If you see, you will be zapped to know that, as I mentioned earlier, Indians are lesser than other foreign nationals. Even in Arthur Road jail, there are a lot of Nigerians, lot of South African people being arrested only in NDPS Act. And we don't even know about it. We came to know when we visited. So it's just that, some fame flows across when certain celebrity is involved. Secondly, about how safe is the witness. See, even in a murder case, a witness is not safe, whether it is a drug case or any other case. But still, somewhere I think law has been successful in curbing activities, because these kind of acts or laws are very stringent. So as I said, even if you are carrying it without knowledge, or if you are helping somebody, still you may come into trouble. So I think a person should think twice about that. About safety of witness in the courts, yeah, it's a dicey situation, but still witnesses come in, and I have seen so many witnesses who have been actually declared on oath certain facts which even the other people didn't. So that happens. I
Okay.
hope this is a satisfactory answer.
Yeah, ma'am, what is the provision for collecting blood samples? Are these samples, which laboratories test the blood samples, and what is the probability of contamination of evidence?
Okay, this is a very good question. First of all, about laboratories and procedures to be followed, it is all government authorized. It can't be given to private agencies. So there are certain government approved or government hospitals themselves who conduct certain tests, just like forensics are done. And secondly, about contamination of evidence, yes, there are chances it could be mishandled. But when certain cases like these come up in the courts, I think every other person is at least a little bit worried or scared if he does some mischief. So if the sample is correctly collected by the police who is in charge, and he knows that his higher authorities are going to catch hold of him if something happens tomorrow, so he may do his job, and he will be directly, see, certain sensitive evidences go directly to the person. It just doesn't flow via through different people. So the person may personally, that policeman would personally go and give it to the doctor who is in charge. Now this in charge doctor is of high stature. He is also worried about his career prospects, right? So yes, of course, we come across a lot of cases where there is lot of manipulation with evidences, but that doesn't happen very frequently. Honestly, we feel that in India everything happens, but trust me, when you start doing practice, or when once you start litigating, you will realize that all these loopholes are taken care of very smartly by the police or by the other people who are involved in the case. Because one thing is for sure, that once this case goes in the court, everything is going to be on the table of the judge. Whether he discloses to people or not, that's another case, because some things could be very, very confidential. And that's how everything is taken care of, whether it's written or not. They know how to do the handling. Thank you so much.